Hello and welcome to episode 6 of Natasha Explains It All. Today's episode is going to be focused on how criminal courts work. This might need to be a multi episode explanation, but let's see how much we can cover today. Um, I think that if you are fortunate enough to not have personal experience, either yourself or through a loved one, of going through the criminal court system, um, that it's really hard to understand what actually happens. And I hope that if you are listening to this and you don't have direct experience with the criminal court system, I hope that that continues to be the case because it is a massively unpleasant system, as I'll get into. And I think that um, most television, for example, gives a really skewed view of what happens in the criminal court system, as well as most news as well, because it tends to focus on outlier cases rather than what the majority of cases and the majority of situations entail. And I'm deliberately using the phrase criminal court system because I want to focus on the mechanics of how criminal versus civil courts operate. And among people who work in like the criminal justice advocacy space, there is a lot of debate about what is the most representative name for this system. The criminal justice system is the most, common term, but a lot of people who work in this space, including myself, don't think that the criminal justice system is an accurate description because the focus is not on justice. And I hope that I can help illuminate why that is. And there's lots of alternative terms that are out there. Some refer to it as the criminal injustice system, the criminal injustice system. Some refer to it as the criminal legal system because it is a legal system and it's the criminal legal system versus the civil legal system, which is meant to be a more accurate and perhaps neutral term versus criminal justice system, which implies that, the system gets it right, which it most of the time does not. Um, and there's others who refer to it as the criminal punishment system, which is what I've been leaning towards more recently because punishment is a big focus of the system versus other, potential purposes such as rehabilitation or even public safety, because punishment doesn't necessarily equate with public safety. We can get into that. And then there's also, the penal system, which is kind of old school, but that is what it is. So, anyway, the focus of this episode and potential future episodes is not going to be on the nomenclature, but I want people to know that there is this ongoing debate about what is the most accurate descriptor of our criminal court system versus our civil court system. So I'm going to refer to it in this episode as the criminal court system because I am talking about criminal courts. I'm talking about how criminal courts operate and what the general experience is. So I am going to talk about what is the process of what happens in American criminal courts, speaking generally, for both local, state, and federal criminal courts in the United States. I realize that I'm speaking in generalities, so this is not going to cover all situations, but I stand by my analysis that this is the general experience of most people who go through the criminal court system. And I'm going to try to go through this in a chronological way in terms of first contact through the end of a case. And that's how I'm going to approach it to hopefully bring some light into how all of this operates. So let's get into it. The criminal court system. So, what happens is the first step. So I'm not going to get into the pre-arrest scenarios. There's a lot to unpack there, but let's assume for the sake of today's episodes, we're going to start at the point of arrest. Someone's been arrested. And the police, whoever they are allowed to charge whatever they want. They can, on their police reports and what they will file with the district attorney's office, is they can claim whatever they will can put whatever charges, meaning what criminal offenses are they alleging that this person committed. And when I say that they submit their police reports with the various alleged criminal violations to the district attorney, it might be the district attorney, might be referred to as the prosecutor. It might be referred to as the city attorney, depending on where you are. It could be in the federal system. It's going to be an assistant U.S. attorney. The point is that that's the prosecutor. The prosecutor is a lawyer who works for the government, and they are the person who is going to prosecute the criminal case, meaning they are the person who decides whether the person is going to be formally charged and prosecuted, or whether they're going to not press charges and dismiss the case, or do some type of deferment um, deferment program. Uh, and I will get into each of those. So police arrest somebody, and they will send their police report with the alleged criminal offenses, which again, police can write whatever they want, and send that to the district attorney to make charging decisions. Now, there's several moving pieces happening right now. So, person's been arrested, taken to jail. Then what happens? In most places, the even before the person sees a judge, and oftentimes when you're arrested, unless the relevant police authority, which either might be a city police department or a county sheriff's office, decides to release you from the jail, um, before your first court hearing, most of the time people are going to sit in jail until at least their first court hearing. And before that first court hearing, which is referred to as um, initial appearance or your arraignment, there can be different terms for it. But before that, oftentimes in jails, the sheriff, who's generally the one who is in charge of the jail, will have something called a bail schedule. And that means that you can pay money to buy your freedom. Um, I want to, it's not a diversion, but I want to pause for a second to talk a little bit about the money bail system in the United States and why it is extortion. How does money bail work? So, money bail is a process by which you can pay money to get out of jail. And most places have what is called a bail schedule. And a bail schedule, particularly for that time period where I'm talking about between arrest and before you go before a judge, which generally tends to be anywhere between 24 hours to say a week. Generally, within a few days of being arrested will be the first time you see a judge. It's not immediate. So in that window, the sheriff or whoever is running the jail often will have a bail schedule, and the bail schedule is pretty straightforward. It'll have your charges, and then it'll have a dollar amount associated with that. Again, and those charges at that point are based on whatever the police decided was appropriate. So it will be a chart, and it'll say, let's say it's attempted robbery or whatever. It doesn't matter. Drug possession, simple drug possession, whatever the charge is, then there will be a dollar amount associated with that. And if you can come up with that dollar amount, then you can get out. And what's something that, so, okay, so you can post bail to get out of jail if you have the money. It doesn't matter if you are a flight risk or, could actually be a threat to public safety. If you have the money, you can get out of jail. And one of the things that I don't think is as well understood, and that exacerbates why the criminal court system perpetuates wealth disparities and is a mechanism for keeping people poor and extracting wealth from people who don't have a lot of money to begin with, is how bail functions. And what I mean by that is that if I am a wealthy person or have some means, if I can come up with whatever the dollar amount may be, maybe it's 10 grand, maybe it's 50 grand, maybe it's 100 grand, whatever it is, if I can come up with the full dollar amount, I don't actually have to pay that money. I basically have to put up collateral. Maybe it's actual money that I have, maybe it's my car, maybe it's my car plus, bank account, maybe it's my house, whatever it is. And you basically are creating an insurance policy. And you're basically saying, if I do not show up to my court dates, then the court can seize these assets. Okay. And so if you are a wealthy person or a wealthier person and are able to, if you have assets equal to whatever bail amount was set for you, if you can put that up as collateral and you show up to all of your court hearings, you never actually have to pay anything. However, if you are someone with less money or no money and you are, not a well off person financially, then you have a couple of options. You can hire a private bail bond company, and bail bond companies function like insurance companies, that you will pay them a percentage of your bail. It's generally 10 to 15%, that you will never get back, even if you show up for all of your court hearings, as an assurance that if you don't end up going to your court hearings, they'll pay the rest. So let's look at a specific example. So let's say your bail, just making easy numbers here. Let's say your bail is $10,000. It's set at $10,000. Okay, you don't have $10,000. And so you hire a bail bond company, and the bail bond company says, okay, you pay us a grand, right? 10%, pay us a grand, and we will basically insure your bail amount. So you pay a non-refundable $1,000 to this private bail company. And if in the event you don't show up to your future court hearings and your bail is revoked and you have to go back to jail, the bail bond company will put up the balance of the $9,000. And there are many people who can't even afford that $1,000. And so bail bond companies will put people on payment plans. So in that same example, let's say you have a person, like, even $1,000 is that's unrealistic. They cannot come up with $1,000. And so the bail bond company can say, okay, well, pay us $100 now and we will post your bail and you can get out. And then you're going to be on a payment plan with us for potentially a long time, to pay off the $900 balance, right? Of that $1,000 down payment for your $10,000 bail. And if you don't keep up with those payments, guess who's going to report you to the court? The bail bond company. If you don't keep paying the bail bond company, they will report you and send you back to jail. So, money bail not only favors the wealthy over the non-wealthy, in the sense that the wealthy are more likely to have the money to be able to post bail in the first place, but it also favors the wealthy over the non-wealthy, because the wealthy, if they show up to all their court hearings, never actually have to pay anything. Whereas the person with less means will have to pay something and it will be non-refundable, either an upfront amount to a private bail bond company, or a smaller upfront amount to a private bail bond company, and then a payment plan from there on. And if they fail to make those payments, they're going back to jail because the bail bond company will revoke their jail and say, we're not insuring this person anymore, and you'll be revoked. And those are all scenarios if the person is able to come up with some money. But there are many, many, many people, hundreds of thousands of people across the country on any given day who can't afford bail, whatever the amount is. And so they sit in jail for no other reason than they cannot afford whatever price tag was put on their head. And hence my earlier comment about money bail functioning as a form of extortion, because you're basically having to pay for your freedom, and many, many people, again, to the tune of hundreds of thousands of people on any given day throughout the country, are sitting in jail for no other reason than they can't afford bail. And that's not fair. That is not a just system. And um, so we have where I know we're still like really on in the process here. So I think I'll have to do several episodes on this to really do the whole timeline. So patient, I hope I will it will be worth it to do lots of episodes. So I can go into depth with each stage. But again, we're at the point where the person's been arrested, they've been sent to jail, and we haven't even gotten to the first court hearing. But in that pre arraignment, pre initial appearance time period, they're very likely to have the option to get out of jail based on the sheriff or local police department's bail schedule. And if they have the money, they can post bail in terms of collateral, and get out. And if they don't have the money, then they can hire a private bail company to serve as their insurer, for them to be able to get out. And just a note on terminology. I know that the terms jail and prisons seem to get interused. I don't think that's the word, but used interchangeably. And the easy way to distinguish between the terms is that jails are generally, okay, speaking in general terms here, jails are generally places where people are housed pre-trial, meaning that they haven't been convicted yet or haven't taken a guilty plea or anything. Like their case hasn't been resolved yet. Or I should say, and jails tend to house two populations: people who are pre-trial, so they haven't been convicted of anything, they're waiting for their cases to resolve, and people who have been sent or who have been convicted of misdemeanor offenses. Misdemeanor offenses, generally speaking, tend to come with jail terms that are less than 1 year. And so um, jails tend to house those two populations, generally speaking, the pretrial folks, as well as people who are serving sentences that are under a year. There are exceptions. For example, many jails contract with the federal government to house some federal inmates, or ICE transfers. ICE is Immigration and Customs enforcement. Can do a whole other episode about ICE, and how ICE was created with the Department of Homeland Security in 2003. It's a relatively new thing, and the problems with immigration detention. But again, basically in a jail, you're going to have predominantly people who are pretrial, as well as people who are serving misdemeanor sentences. For example, the jail in Alameda County in California, uh, which I will have to do lots of episodes about because it is a horrible place. Um, but that is over 90% of the population there is pretrial. They haven't had their cases have not been resolved. And that's very typical of jails throughout the country. And then prison, normally when the term prison is referred to, is referring to people who have been sentenced on felony convictions, and so their sentence is going to be more than a year. And so and then the division is also tends to be like jails tend to be more local because generally most counties will have a county jail, some cities will have their own city jail or jails, plural, and then the prisons will tend to be more at the state level and scattered throughout the state. And if you recall back to episode 3, where we talked about prison gerrymandering, prisons do tend to be located in more isolated places, places that are harder to access, and oftentimes take people very far away from their home, and from loved ones and from whatever support network that they did have. And also, therefore, tends to be quite far from wherever it is that they will go back to once they complete their sentence. So, just pausing there to talk about the difference in the terminology of jail versus prison. Okay, so we have talked about arrest. We've talked about then the person is incarcerated, and then generally there is the bail scenario, and then a lot of people can't afford bail, and so they remain in jail while their case is pending, and this creates so many problems. I mean, just in and of itself, right? The idea of being incarcerated simply because you don't have the money to pay bail, in and of itself, is deeply problematic, because that is punishing people for being poor, plain and simple. You are punishing someone for not having money, and you have taken away their most basic and most fundamental right, which is their physical freedom, right? I don't think there's a right that is more important to that, right? Like our physical freedom. You are now in the custody of the government for no other reason than you don't have the money. Because someone who is charged with the exact same offense, if they can afford bail, they will get out. Okay. Now there are situations where the sheriff or the police department can decide to just release people without bail. They have generally that discretion, and when we get to the court portion, the court can also do that. That's normally called OR or PR, meaning own recognizance or personal recognizance, meaning that the person is released without any form of money bail. They're just released on their own recognizance or personal recognizance. And the law enforcement authority over the jail, again, generally a sheriff, sometimes it can be a police department, generally has that authority as well to release people without the use of money bail. But many people are subject to this money bail system. And uh, if you think about it, right? If someone is now incarcerated because they can't afford bail, many things can happen. A lot of people lose their homes because they're not home to be able to pay rent. And so they can lose their apartments or may not be able to mortgage. They might lose their home. People lose their jobs, right? Because now they're not showing up to work, so they're going to lose their jobs. People lose custody of their kids because they're not there to be able to provide care and look after their children. It also makes it incredibly difficult to prepare any type of defense for your case because you're not free to be able to gather evidence, assist your attorney in like knowing who to interview, to gather witness statements, and to even be psychologically in a good place to be able to provide, to be able to defend your case. You don't have your support network with you. You're not sleeping in your own bed. You don't have your friends and family with you. You don't have your routine. You're in a jail, where you are going to be you're going to be isolated, likely subject to a lot of abuse. And the only way that you are going to be able to talk to your attorney is through, you know, they're either going to have to set up legal calls with the jail or come visit you in jail, but it is so much more of a barrier than if you're free and you can, you can communicate at will. And also, while you're incarcerated, then you're also not bringing in any income, which would allow you to either hire an attorney or just take care of other things for you to be able to, um, address this, really serious situation, that has, come into your life. So, and imagining as well the strain that pretrial detention can put on personal relationships, spousal relationship, partner relationships, parent child relationships, anything like that. And pretrial detention can last a very, very, very long time. It could be a few days, it could be a few weeks, it could be a few months, it could be a few years. Pretrial detention can last a very long time. And I will have to get into this in another episode about how prosecutors use the fact of pretrial detention to coerce people into accepting pleas that they otherwise, wouldn't accept. But what I want to finish this episode off with is I'll put this in the show notes. There are various organizations, mutual aid projects, as well as formal 501c3 nonprofits that have bail funds and raise money to pay people's bail. And the idea being is trying to, ameliorate the incredibly harmful effects of a money bail based system by putting up bail for those who can't afford it. And it functions like a fund because, as I said, remember that, you post your bail, and if you show up to all your court hearings, um, for the person with the money, you never have to pay anything, right? Like, or you get that money back, right? You put up that money, you show up to all your hearings, and then you get it back. It's like on hold, right? It's like a deposit, security deposit, and then you get it back, because you showed up to all your court dates. And so bail funds function in the same way. You donate to the bail fund does the screening to figure out who qualifies, and they will post someone's bail so that the person does not have to be detained pretrial solely because they do not have the money to post bail. And then if that person then goes and shows up to all of their court hearings and then they resolve, that money is released and that goes back into the fund so that they can, post bail for someone else. And so there are some national organizations like the Bail Project. Again, I will link this in the show notes, that, have lots of local affiliates and do a lot of research around the issue of money bail. And then there are others that are very, very, local, like the Colorado Freedom Fund, which I will, again, post in the show notes. It's based, as the name implies, in Colorado. They're predominantly in the Denver area, but they do some work outside of that. And I will link some others, as well. So I realized I really didn't get that far in laying out how criminal courts work. So this is going to be a many, many part series. But recapping again: arrest, pretrial detention, this pre-arraignment bail schedule thing. And then in the next episode, I will get into the next steps. So thanks for listening and see you next time.